All right. Welcome, everybody, to More Than Commas. I am so glad to have you back. And I am especially excited today because we have a guest named Jaidin McCann. I'm going to have her share more of her story and background. But this is an episode in helping high earners, not retired yet. How do you get out in the marketplace, position yourself well for that next role? And how do you get positioned by the recruiter to give you the best opportunity coming in? Let's join us with Jaidin McCann.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul. I'm excited to be here.
Well, tell everybody just a little bit about your background, kind of your entrepreneurial journey before landing with PeopleConnect now.
Oh gosh, yes. I started off as an HR executive building HR divisions and talent acquisition teams from the ground up, and then got to come in and build recruiting agencies from the ground up and had the opportunity. I've built four out now. I've built six companies, or I shouldn't say, I helped to found or built for another founder. I didn't found all of them, but helped to build six companies from the ground up for myself or others. I've three successful exits. And now I sit as the president of PeopleConnect, which is the staffing arm of a venture capital firm.
So, not only have you helped other people build their businesses by helping them recruit the right talent, but you've had to build several businesses now where you had to bring in the talent. So, I think maybe first question I'm going to ask from more of like the owner's side is as you built those other companies, what were the things that you watched for most in the characteristics of the people you're bringing in an effort to either enhance your culture or protect the culture that you had?
Great question. Oh, I love this. Brings me to my HR days. And no matter how long I haven't been an HR executive, some of the things will never leave my mind. They're ingrained. And bringing in, and this is not new information. You probably hear it in the market all the time, but it's A players. I want people who will take accountability and initiative, who are open and honest. And when I say open and honest, it's really easy to say, to give feedback and say, I'm being honest. I think it's a lot harder for people to be open to hearing that feedback in return. But the big thing I look for, and when you say A players, right? A players hire A players, B players hire C players, right? You've
Right.
strategy before. What I want to bring to the table is what makes an A player is self security.
No, no.
Insecure leaders hire people that are not as good as them because they're afraid to hire people that are as good or better than them and fear they're going to take their job. If you're a secure leader, you want people who are better than you. You want to grow them and develop them. You want them to become better than you. And that way, as you rise, they can rise with you and everyone elevates together as an organization. So it's hard, to ask interview questions around, hey, are you secure in yourself? But really, as a leader, if you're insecure and not fully secure in yourself, and I would work on that first. First rule of leadership advice, that's what I would work on. And then when looking for people within those organizations, I look for self-security. I look for those A players who will take accountability and ownership and dive in and take initiative without having to be asked. And truly those A players who want to see everyone around them build and grow and become an even better IC, individual contributor or leader than they were, so that everyone in the organization can succeed together. And then on the flip side, fire fast. I've seen so many times people be able to develop this security within an organization because they have control, they don't delegate, they hold a ton of power because they're not strong leaders, but they have maybe all the contact lists or they own an entire part of this organization. So you can't let them go. They know you can't let them go. It would take two, three people to replace them. But what happens there is a lot of times when they have insecurities, if there's a power dynamic or a threat to their power dynamic, they stir up a lot of drama. And what the CEO ends up doing is letting go of all the other people around that toxic person because they're always the problem and they're trying to preserve their high performer that they can't afford to let go of. And so, really watching for those behaviors and making sure we have a structure and SOPs in place that doesn't allow for that situation to happen.
You're talking about you have all these openings, all these holes on your organizational chart. And what you're saying, I think I'm hearing, is if you don't find enough A players, then what you're going to have in your org chart are A holes because
Yes.
you won't have filled them with any A players, which means they get filled by an A hole. But I do think there is something to that idea of having, there's an old saying of sick sheep beget sick sheep. And it's like you bring in that person. And I know I've seen me as an owner where you're hiring somebody like, well, this person's good enough to be able to get this job done, but not thinking about who do they replicate. And that we can end up growing an organization that maybe even has strong SOPs that let some rather mediocre players still have some degree of success. And we could be degrading our culture over time. Uh, let's go to the flip side of that same question. I cannot tell you how many people where they are in that high level where their compensation packages are starting at 300 salary and then they've got all their performance on top of that. But I've had people walk into very great high compensation roles and find out the culture was terrible. What advice do you give to the other side of the equation? Because they can't necessarily, well, in some ways, they may have enough influence to change a culture. But how do you find out what the culture is before you get there?
Oh, that is such a good question. And I will give some advice to say a lot of times it's the company's strategy. I'll be very frank. There's a Fortune 100, Fortune 50, Fortune 5 company that I work with that their entire strategy is 2-year turnover. They want those new innovative thinkers. They want to get as much out of you as they can. They want those people to turn over, but they pay the highest on the market anyone will pay because that's how they attract them in. If there is an extremely high salary, sometimes that's for a reason, right? It allows you
Right.
to stay in toxic cultures. So know that that alone could be a sign of
That
why it is. And
the thing
people
the thing the executive's thinking of as they're looking for the role is the biggest green flag might be the biggest red flag.
might be the biggest red flag. That's a good line, right? Just put it on a t-shirt. Why the biggest green flag might be the biggest red flag. There are, on the flip side, though, many companies that pay well because they love their employees. They want to engage and retain them. They want to pay them what they're worth for the value that they're providing for an organization. So don't see, oh, they pay so much money. They must be atrocious and toxic, but do know that is a strategy that
Yes.
companies use intentionally. One thing I would really focus on is the interview questions that you ask at the end of each interview as a candidate. You do or should get an opportunity to ask questions. It is a two-way street, whether the company thinks so or not. And if they don't offer you a chance to ask questions, that's a sign right there. But then you do have the opportunity to dive in and ask questions. And you can even ask to talk to employees that you would be working with on the team and get the good, the bad, and the ugly from them. Companies that want you move mountains to have you. And so they will let you talk to a bunch of different people in order to make your decision. It doesn't have to be this is the interview process and you can't deviate from that. So I would ask to talk to other employees and get the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then there's also specific interview questions that you can ask to dive into culture, whether asking plainly, you can ask plainly what that culture looks like. But on the flip side, there's psychological questions that you can also ask to get to know them better.
Oh yeah. So share. So we need to know these.
And there's dual side to this. I usually give more advice to candidates on the questions to ask to sell yourself at the end.
Yeah.
But in terms of diving into culture, asking leadership accountability questions. Hey, when's the last time that an employee had an issue with your leadership style and what was it? If they are like, nobody has problems with my leadership style, what that tells me is that they aren't approachable,
Yeah.
right? They don't have a culture of transparency, of authenticity, and they are not as vulnerable as a leader. So people don't feel comfortable giving them that feedback or they're not asking. Now it then they'll give you the answer of what their negative feedback has been in the past and see if that aligns with you. Is
Yeah.
that something you're totally fine with? Great. if, you like being I don't wanna use the word micromanaged for people that like it, because some
Yeah.
people prefer that structure and being told exactly what to do and when to do it, and they will execute, and they love that. And if that's the feedback that manager got and that aligns with you, great. But if you're a high performer and you're like, "Get out of my way," right? I need autonomy and room to run, and that's the feedback they gave, maybe that's not the environment that you want to be in.
Well, and especially with these level roles, you kinda get the chance in if you're interviewing with the person you're gonna directly report to be able to shape the role the way you know you'll be successful, but I love that because you don't get the opportunity if you don't set that up. Now, as a bit of a follow on in all this AI stuff and people worried about their jobs and all of that, what are your thoughts about, like, the feeling they get in their stomach where they just want the interview to go well, and they don't want to ask that question at the end that asks in the culture or something like that, that might potentially disrupt this? How do you advise they deal with the still asking the question when they've got that pit in their stomach or concern, or do you tell them to skip it? When you're making $500,000 base, those jobs don't come up just there's a bit of a hunt to get there.
Mhm.
So when they get to that place where they want to do the almost co-interview of the employer, but they get the pit in their stomach and asking,
Oh,
how do you coach them to deal with it?
I would say you ask anyway. And my number one advice to any, especially if you're a leader and an executive in an organization and you're interviewing, companies move mountains, they move paychecks. I can tell you my background's in executive search. I've owned my executive search firm. They move mountains for the leaders that they trust and want. You are outsourcing a branch of your organization to a person who's going to lead, develop, set the tone and culture of that organization, and they expect and count on them to hit those goals. Companies, when they find the right leader, will move mountains, but it on the candidate side is all about coming from a place of leverage the entire time. If you don't ask questions, you're not coming from a place of leverage. If you're saying, "Hey, this is a one-way street. I'm just lucky to be in this interview. Thank you for interviewing me." If you
They actually hurt your candidacy by not asking the critical questions.
you do, you
That's
do.
exactly what my intuition was, but I'm like, I don't know how you'd tell people to proceed. I didn't want to give everybody listening terrible advice.
No, you ask questions. You set the tone. You don't have to don't say, "Hey, this is a two-way street." But when you ask the questions, you set the tone. "Hey, I can work anywhere. Why should I come work for you?" And don't be cocky about it, but that's what asking the questions naturally does, right? So
Yes.
saying, "Hey, I'm looking for a culture like X, Y, and Z. What would you say your culture looks like?" Or you can say, "I'm interviewing with companies that have these qualities. Would you say you align with those?" Now there's multiple options. I'm not just talking to you. Whether you're just talking to them or not, you want to have leverage and be in a place of control and power throughout the interview process. And I see this commonly as an example, reaching out to employees or employers saying, "Hi, my name's so and so. I'm looking for work." You've lost all your power and credibility and leverage. But if you reach out to them and say, "Hey, my name's Jaidin. I'm thinking of jumping over from tech to biotech. And I'd love to pick your brain on what you look for in candidates so that I can best position myself when I go to market." Now, what you've done is you have leveraged. You're not asking them for a job. They know you're going to start looking. It's their decision when they hop on a call to give you advice, which makes them have a connection with you, feel like they're your champion. Also, there's a little hint of, "Well, why aren't you asking me for a job?" Right?
Yes.
"Why are you gonna go to other people? Why not me?" But now when they go and say and they get to know your background, right? They hop on the call to give advice, they get to know you and your background, you've never asked them for a job, and now it's their decision in their mind to say, "Hey, we need you and the skill set you provide. What would you think about interviewing with us?"
Well,
Now
and
you still have that leverage throughout the interview process, and you came from a place of power instead of vulnerability.
well, and what a great thing for everybody who's looking right now for all of this sort of networking coffees and the touch bases and all of that, to just have it learning about other companies' culture, asking the questions like a candidate would, but from curiosity, not from need, which I know is a little bit of a like it can mess with people's heads a little bit because they really do have the feeling of wanting to have that job, but you almost have to put yourself in the mindset of, I need to be asking all of the questions that 5 years from now, I will realize I should have asked before accepting this job.
Yes, absolutely. There are so many little tips and tricks that allow you to come to the conversation and into the interview process with leverage that aren't lies, right? Don't say you're currently working if you're
Yeah.
not currently working. Please don't do that. But that allow you to position yourself in a, hey, I don't need this job, but I love what this company does. I love this manager or person that I would be working for. I love what you guys stand for and your position in the market. And I would be open to having a conversation about working here if everything aligns.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is very different than, do you guys have openings? And it really, and in hearing both of those just now, just as an owner, one occurs very, very different, and frankly, in a world where executives that are making those kinds of hiring decisions have a lot of people surrounding them all the time who want something from them directly and right now. And to be able to have coffee with somebody that, I think I think key to what you're saying, if somebody's sort of putting their toe in this for the first time, maybe not because you're young in your career, maybe just you've been in the same place for 15 years and now you're looking again, that it really needs to be all like mindset right about, I'm just being curious. That you, no matter how good it looks or how like, "Hey, let's set that up another time. We don't need to go into that today. I just wanna learn more about the company." Like, even pulling it away produces that induced scarcity that people cannot help but respond to.
It's like the number one rule of getting funded in a startup is saying, hey, I'm not looking for funding right now. Turns out venture capitalists want to fund that startup. Same thing goes with job applications and seeking work. Actually, on the topic of job applications, I
Mhm.
will share that job applications are not the way, especially for senior leaders to get a job.
Oh, yeah.
And I really recommend spending no more than 5% of your time applying for jobs because at the executive level, majority of roles are not even posted. Over 70% are not posted. So there's this whole back end kind of black market, if you will, of roles that exist that candidates just don't have visibility into. And so how do you get visibility into it's through those relationships with hiring managers.
And I could be misinformed on this, but isn't some of that is even navigating certain state regulations and everything else that they can't post all of these roles because of all of the extra slowdown they would have in hiring, et cetera. So what is it you notice? I mean, this kind of maybe speaks to two things at once. Because of that I think there's a lot of people out there who maybe are in their early sort of executive and managerial roles. They're making mid 100s right now, and they want to break out and get to that next level. But to your point, there's a bunch of roles out there they're not just putting on the internet. So
Mhm.
is it the networking inside their existing roles that gets them the greatest exposure to all those pocket opportunities?
Yeah, it is definitely the building relationships with the hiring managers. And I mean, when I say hiring managers, I mean direct decision makers who have the power to hire you, right? At the VP level, it's going to be the C suite. At the director level, it's going to be VPs. But building those relationships is imperative because no one has better access to the living, breathing workforce planning than the ones that will be hiring for those roles, as well as at the executive level, especially, roles get created. When you find top talent and top leaders and you know you have a need, I've seen roles created for candidates just based on networking alone with that decision maker. So I would definitely recommend reaching out, building relationships at networking events, making sure you know where they stand in that organization and building those authentic, genuine relationships with them coming from a place of leverage and curiosity and not ego. I feel like it's a fine balance. I always want to specify, not ego. That tells me you're an insecure leader and I'm not hiring you.
Yes.
But all to say is really prioritizing those relationships with direct decision makers that have the ability to hire you and reaching out with them to them.
So what would you say then for people that hit the plateau in their career? What do you think separates those people that are moving through corporate America adeptly and some people break through and in their particular realm, whether that's marketing, sales, operations, finance, but they've gotten themselves up to the C-suite or just below where they're making 800,000 a million a year. And then there's other people that just sort of stall out and sort of struggle to maintain a role that's making 200 a year, year after year. What do you think separates those two people most on their career path?
I love this question because I give advice to executives on this all the time who are in exactly that situation. One thing I want to be really clear on is what we have this term in our industry, and we call them career directors.
Hmm.
Because at the director level and typically age range, you break off into categories, right? The ones who are more ambitious, who want to keep moving up, want to keep working, and the ones typically, right, they settle in, maybe they have a family and work just isn't their priority, or they're just not as ambitious and want to keep growing. And that's okay too, right? Everyone has different priorities, but this one is okay being a director for the remainder. Maybe they get promoted to VP internally because they did great, but they're not looking to increase the cash. This group is the ambitious, right? I want to keep moving up, keep moving up. The thing at the director level is that it's a bell curve. You need enough experience at the director level before we trust you to be a VP. But too long in there, and we say, why haven't you moved up already?
Mm.
And you get labeled a career director. So,
Ah,
what? Where it starts working against you is around 6 to 8 years. So if you're approaching, if being a VP in C-suite is what you want to do not stay in a director role for more than 6 to 8 years. It will work against you. And I'm sorry, that's just true. And the nature
yeah.
it is. But one thing to note too is that at the executive level, getting to the director level and what got you there is not what gets you to the next level. It is a different game. It is like graduating from college and having to get your first job, but you haven't had your first job yet until someone
Mhm.
takes a chance on you. It's just like that. Same as when you get into board seats, right? We keep playing that game our whole lives. And you got promoted into being a director, management director track for high performance. And then your ability to lead a team. High performance is not what gets you, or not even what's important at the VP and C suite level. We have a ton at the director level. There are a ton of high performers, ton of high performers that got there. Not enough VP and C suite level roles. What makes you stand out and what's actually important is your executive presence, who you know, and who you can prove and who's best positioned in the market, right? Who can I look at to say this person will effectively lead my teams, build my culture, get my company and my OKRs and KPIs where I need to go? Who can I trust to outsource this person to and represent the company well? So, what I would say is step one, right? Who's best positioned in the market? If you've been a director forever, but maybe you're a director at Amazon and your size and scope is that of a VP of a mid-sized company, you should not be saying your title's this. You should be advertising your size and scope, right? Position your
Mhm.
best you can in the market with the cards you've been dealt and with the amazing things you've accomplished. The next is who you know. This is your network and what I was referring to earlier about building relationships with decision makers who have the power to hire you and build your network. Oftentimes, especially in enterprise, we get so bogged down by our jobs and what
Yes.
we're doing day to day that we forget to go to those networking events and meet new people. That it is imperative.
Well, it's so easy because all of the business stuff they're paying you for is on a conveyor belt coming at you every day. And all this relationship building is something you got to go out and act. Nobody's going to tell you to do it. In fact, the company would prefer you not because it's only going to expand your demand for additional resources or compensation.
Harvard Business Review did a study on average. The average executive networks 15 hours plus a week. A week. If you are not networking, Guess who's winning all those deals because they've met all of those people? Guess who knows how to play the game right and well and has established those relationships? I wonder why you're frustrated if you haven't been building that network out. And then, of course, who communicates with executive presence? This is imperative, right? You are representing the company, especially if it's a publicly traded company.
Mhm.
Uh, they need to know you can communicate well to your teams, to board members, to stakeholders, and represent the company well. So these three, it's no longer about high performance.
That is like high performance is the ante that gets you to the table. And then then once you're at the director level, that is like, of course you're a high performer. So now the question is, can you work with teams? Can you have executive presence that takes care of the company's identity, which is like a whole different level? Somebody could be a director and be a wreck in their personal life. But when they get in the C suite, it's like, oh no, your children's behavior can matter to stock price. That's a different animal.
Yeah, it's about trust. At the end of the day, in the sales world, it's a trust economy right now. In the hiring world, it's a trust economy as well. Are you someone that someone can trust? And you might think, yes, right? You might think, oh, of course they can. Why am I not getting hired? But what are you portraying? What are other people picking up about you? And can they, when they meet you, without a doubt, say, yes, I can trust outsourcing this entire department or division of my company to this person?
Well, and that's another just a little bit of a twist that I haven't thought of before. Is it really is that when people are getting hired for these big roles, somebody's saying, "I'm putting you in charge of a $300 million business of ours
Yes.
that's that's over there." What? Okay, one last big, maybe controversial question that might give me a couple more questions. I don't remember the name. I should have had it ready. Of the people that were at the Coldplay concert, and the guy was hugging his head of HR. Yeah, when we talk about how a company's outcomes can really be impacted by trustworthy or not behavior of its executives, that was a pretty bad one. For those of you that maybe were living in a cave, there was a CEO of a major company who was at a Coldplay concert with his head of director, a chief people officer, whatever, and with a team there, and he had his arm around her swaying to the song when the audience camera came up, which probably would have passed with nobody saying anything and it would have moved on. But when the camera was on them, they both hid immediately. One point, the Coldplay lead singer goes, "Wow, those people are either really shy or they're married to other people." Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy. And it turned out they were married to other people. So put yourself in that boardroom the day after that story kicks off. What with your HR hat, your recruiting hat, the board is saying, "What do we do?" Jaden, what does Jaden McCann tell them?
We let them go. Company image, what I will say is it's not even about company image to me through my HR lens, right? That's my
Mm,
boardroom level lens, but
yeah.
through my HR lens, it actually is very common for CEOs to have feelings for their HR leader because they're their confidant. They're the person, all these things are going on. They share all this information. They're problem strategizing together. And it psychologically, I won't dive into all like the neuroscience side of it, but it is very common for
This
CEOs
this is
to
amazing. I've never heard this take on it before. This is so
it's
they get
common
put
because that's your safe space, business safe space.
yes.
Your wife or, significant other should be that, but work safe space, you problem solve together. You have the dopamine release of solving problems together, moving the needle forward, and they are your trusted person within the organization. So I understand how it happens. I have had multiple CEOs come to me. Other HR leaders have had CEOs come to them. It is not uncommon. What I will say is that it is one on the CEO not to act on it because it is a working relationship. And two, it is on the CHRO to also not act on it because one, you're HR.
Yeah.
You're HR. And the sad part to me is that, and I don't know their current, this was months ago, I don't know their current status, but
Yeah.
to me, my very first thought when I saw that is he's going to find another job and she will never work in HR again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I
so
thought the
he
same thing.
lost his job and he should have. To me, again, yes, it's about company image on the board level, but as an HR level, I can't have a leader of the organization hitting on women within the organization. I am glad they were at, equivalent levels,
Yeah.
but could you imagine if it were a VP, a director, or even an individual contributor? It
Oh,
is
yeah.
up to the organization. Um, Also, when something like that happens, sometimes follow-on allegations tend to come out. I'm not even gonna speculate on that, but yes, it would have been an HR nightmare, but HR was a part of the nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and this idea, which, man, for anybody listening to take this to heart and guard your heart in a situation like that, because I could see that like, because there are things that go on in an organization that literally it's only appropriate that those two roles would even talk about. The rest of the C-suite might be brought in when a problem's solved as an inform, but these are not publicly shared things and super hard problems to solve. And never thought about the almost trauma bonding they can have over that. So it's, yeah, really incredible different way to look at it. And to your point, and I think the thing that gets lost in a lot of this is, for that CEO especially, is that regardless of who it is, if he's romantically involved with any employee, he is putting the entire company at risk. But this idea that they can get trauma bonded and then make the error, which kind of leads me to almost every person that has an affair is temporary insanity caused by love or what feels like love at the time. And the same thing can happen to a CEO and to a head of HR is that a lot of that goes out the window because of all this trauma bonding that creates a cloud. Really amazing feedback. One last to last question then. Compensation. These folks are walking in on these high level roles. And as they've, where they're navigating a $500,000 base comp package, the downside for them is there are very few people they can talk about in their whole career that I've ever dealt with that more than a few times. What would you say, coming from your perspective, when do they start talking compensation and how, like, what tips would you give executives for navigating that, given some of them may only deal with it every 4 or 5 years for their next role acquisition? How early in that process, that's, say you are director level at Amazon and you're going to take a step to a smaller company but with a bigger role, like, how early in that conversation do you recommend the executive make sure that compensation's on the table?
Yes, well, I will say whether it's an external or internal recruiter, they'll bring it up in the very first call.
Okay.
We want to know that. We don't wanna waste our time with someone who needs way more than we know will ever get approved, and I will say that's really what we're looking at, right? We're not looking at trying to screw you over and what's the least amount we can pay you. We are looking at, is this person way out of our price range because they meet the talent bar that we're looking at? And we want to move you forward. We want a placement, right? If we think you're a
Yeah.
great fit, we want you to be a fit. We want that placement. So we will bring it up in the first call. Now, commonly, what I'll hear is, hey, I'm open to negotiation. It depends on the size and scope of the role. And I feel like I would need to dive in and have more information. More than an acceptable answer if you don't want to get priced out.
Yeah.
And then you can say, can you share the range you have with me? I would always ask for the range. I hate sharing this because the first person who throws out a number loses. So I don't want to give that advice because it works against me, but it's true and I'll give it. I would always give that first answer. Hey, I'm open. I need to know more about the role to truly determine whether I'd be willing to come in at this price range versus this price range. However, I'd love to hear what your range is for the role. If the recruiter shares it and it's way below what you're willing to do, like way below, I would say, hey, I cannot do that, right? There's only so much we can get approved.
Yeah.
But if it's within range, know that you can negotiate later. I would not negotiate in that call. I would just say, okay, Um, and then say, "Hey, I was hoping for higher." So the recruiter will put that in the notes. They will expect you to negotiate for more later,
Yeah.
but know that they have a band that they can go up, especially in larger organizations. What happens even when we post a role is we have the lower band, the middle band, and the high band. We are allowed to give you anywhere within that band before going for finance team approval. which we will go to and get finance team approval, even if it's outside the high band for a lot of people, if we can justify it. So never think, right? When you see a job posted, that's the low band to the medium band range we're
Yep.
giving you. When we give you a band, we'll typically give you the low to top of medium. And if you're like, darn, that's too low and move on, we have room to grow, right? We're not going to give
Yeah.
you the biggest number we could possibly get you. That would be a poor business move on our part. But what I'll also note is there is leverage and capital in knowing the hiring manager, having the time to prove your value and your worth to the organization. They're willing to pay you more money. But that doesn't work if you never get to know the hiring manager because you don't move past the recruiter phone screen.
Very good. Very good. Great advice. And I think really speaks to like what you're building with People Connect now, right? Is that you want to bring in the best possible people. It's a failure of the recruiter's business model if they can't move the needle to get the right people. And giving the candidate that clarity of don't blow up the deal too early over finances. If it's close, keep progressing and sell yourself further along the way.
Yeah. And know that we're your advocate. We will go and sell you too, whether we're internal or external, whether we get money for the placement or we don't. We want that placement. Our KPIs are tied to it, our bonuses are tied to it. We want to fill it with the right person. But if you're the right person and comp is in our way, we're not the finance team.
Yeah.
We will go and fight for you and advocate for you to make more money so that we can fill that role with the person we feel is best suited for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it helps everybody, the right person, the right role helps everybody's identity over time.
Absolutely.
Jaden, I'm so glad you could be here and that we could get a chance to have this conversation. We know you're in demand and hearing your email binging off in the background that people are trying to get a hold of you. The longer we go, the more the beeps go. So I know we've got to wrap. But before we leave, how can people reach out to you, get a hold of you, connect with you if they have a reason to ping you after the show?
Absolutely. You can honestly reach out to me directly at Jaidin, Jaidin, at peopleconnectstaffing.com. I will happily give my email out to people who are interested in chatting. I love supporting companies that are looking to hire, and I also love supporting candidates and answering their questions. I don't think any conversation or introduction is a waste of time. So feel free to network with me. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn at Jaidin McCann. And then as well as feel free to check out the website, peopleconnectstaffing.com and fill out our form there. That will route to my team. But if say the right things, they will get you to me as well.
I heard Jaden on the podcast with the bearded guy, and they'll get you right there. Well,
Yeah.
Jaden, one, I am so pleased with this episode and on this the little bit of a left turn I took at the end, but best feedback I've ever heard on the topic. We're definitely clipping that out. Just glad that you could be here and join us. And for everybody at home, I hope that this has been another episode that helps you design and build a good life.